Welcome back, venturers. It's time for another discussion about VN. I am Amar, and together with Taurus, we talk about guests in VNs. Well, we are used to talk with guests on the podcast, but what about characters in VNs that transcended their own title to appear in another story altogether? This is an episode for them to discuss all those that, well, crossed over to a different title. Taurus, what is a crossover character?
What is a crossover character? That's a surprisingly difficult question to answer. But I think it's something along the lines of anyone would say a crossover character is a character who is appearing in a story that was not originally part of that series' cast. There's the more I think about it, the more weird distinctions that come up between whether a character belongs to one series or another, or is this a shared universe, and can you really call it a crossover if they're just making... And how do cameos fit into this? It's all pretty interesting, and there's a lot to it. But generally, the point is, a crossover is a character showing up in a story who is, I guess you could say, more entrenched in a different story. And so it comes in as a sort of surprise guest appearance, you could say. Do you agree with that, Mr?
Yeah, I would say when it comes to the distinction between a cameo and a crossover, I would say it's the relevance. Whereas the cameo would be someone who makes an appearance and it's kind of brushed off. Whereas crossover can be entangled slightly more into the story and or narrative. That's how I would make the distinction.
The difference between a crossover and cameo would be how much of the story they play a part in?
Yes, how much relevant they are in.
Interesting, okay. Does a crossover have to go both ways? For example, if the character arrives in, one title, does that mean some of the other characters have to show up in the other series as well?
I don't think so, but now you made me think, okay? Of
I know,
those
right?
cases.
I don't think so either, but when you think about the word itself, crossover, it's both of them coming together, so you would think it would go both ways. Should it? I don't know. There's a whole big world out there.
True, because now you tied that definition into what if the worlds are entangled and part of a bigger universe or shared space. Damn it. Okay. Again, my simple distinction would be with the crossover characters being someone a bit more entrenched in the world that they crossed into, whereas cameo is more lighthearted or maybe just acknowledgement and move on.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. But with that out of the way, how about we first tackle some examples that we've seen in the visual novel sphere? And so, one that immediately came to my mind was a little fan game that I had the good fortune to be a beta tester for. It was a fan project called Danganronpa Forge Re. This was one hell of a crossover. The premise of it is that Foxy from Five Nights at Freddy's has assembled together a cast of, I want to say, 14 kidnapped individuals, all to take part in a deadly killing game on his own remote island. And the characters involved range from various visual novels, various anime series, various video games, and even real-life Charles Barkley. I take that back. It's not the real-life Charles Barkley. Specifically, it's the Charles Barkley from Shut Up and Jam Gaiden. Our main character is an amnesiac girl who we recognize as Hanako from Katawa Shoujo. However, she has amnesia and doesn't remember anything about herself, so the other characters nickname her Bacon. Yeah.
When preparing for this episode and gathering the assets to run in the background, it looks like a fever dream, okay? What is going on and why are you calling her bacon, okay? Why is there a Swagukami
We
from
have such a
Persona?
wonderful cast, including Miles Edgeworth from Ace Attorney. We have TK from Angel Beats. We have Nagito from Danganronpa 2. And yes, that's a good one. It is not Narukami from Persona 4. No, he is Swagukami, who has a pair of those swag sunglasses with a completely different personality.
That is a very interesting take, but because the moment you twist a character and make fun of, let's say, the popular view or how the fandom views it, is it still that same character? Is it still a crossover? Is it something else?
Does it transition into homage territory?
Ooh,
Perhaps.
maybe.
But regardless, one thing that I really enjoyed about beta testing it is that the developer was a very skilled writer. I know this all sounds like a joke, and to a certain degree it is with this incredible cast of characters, but having the skill to back it up, to write all of the characters' dialogue suitably, is a huge improvement over a lot of other joke, fandom works out there. Many of the characters felt as if, yes, they had been dropped in here from their original game series. They would act in, I guess you could say, consistent ways, but in ways that made me think that they still retain their personalities in a very strange, new world for all of them. And one of my biggest praises for this game is how well they all mix together. I don't know about everyone else, but I love crossovers for the character interactions they bring us. And I mean, that sounds obvious when you say it like that, but I always love seeing the weird, unique pairings that crop up. I don't want to see stuff like just, here's main character interacting with main character, and here's heroine interacting with heroine, and tsundere interacting with tsundere, all just from counterparts from the other works. And it's like, okay, that's cool and all, but that's playing it safe. I want to see the weird new developments that come up. I want to see how these murder mysteries play out, and who takes what kind of roles as they investigate the scenes. Like, in what way could you imagine that Charles Barkley and Tamamo from Monster Girl Quest would strike up a great friendship? Who knew that Edgeworth and Ange from Trauma Team 2 and Machina from Grisaya would strike up, such a great family grouping together of them relying on each other? Or like when you have Swagukami, who is teaching, what do you say her name? Aegis from Persona 3, how to be cool and one with the swag. That's the kind of stuff I love seeing in these kinds of crossover titles, man. Give me more of that, yeah.
That's true. The part of the appeal for such a crossover is to see how that particular character that you may like, maybe your favorite, behaves in a different environment, especially interacting with other characters, and how that shapes how to be.
Yeah, it's all in the uniqueness, right. And it's especially difficult when you have this styled as a death game, like as it is with Danganronpa. The only way to escape is to murder one of your fellow friends on the island and escape unsuspected from a trial. And so that comes to a certain degree of, taking liberties with some characters and trying to justify how some of them would be compelled to commit murder. And that's not easy. And I think, some ways that they were handled and the circumstances leading up to the events that happened before, during, and after all play up to their character personalities very well. There's a lot of character growth in the series, and that's another thing that you're not going to usually see in these kinds of character crossovers, is that you have a lot of static. characters. Like, sure, you could say it's all fan service. It's getting to see a character on sharing the screen who you would never think would be there before. But having like actual character growth, relationship changes, the way the events leave a mark on them for the future, that's all the stuff that contribute to being a great story. And I think a lot of crossover events and characters certainly are great in their own right, and they don't need to try to evolve to be a great story, but here's an example, or here's a chance where they can.
And I feel like when you brought up at the start that the creator of this fun title had a lot of skill in writing, this kind of interaction and work tests that skill, because it takes effort to stay true to the characters you want to cross over with what makes them that character intact, and for others to port them in a way that makes homage to how the community views them in case of Swagokami, right? Which is not necessarily how he was in the original, but rather how the community created of Persona fans created his image, right? It's like, damn, it takes skill to navigate through that.
Yeah, Danganronpa Forgery was a very fun experience reading through while it happened. Unfortunately, it was hosted on like the RPG Maker games website, but that website has been down for like the past year. I don't think it's coming back. And since this product was technically never finished, and I don't think it ever will be finished, such is the fate of all sorts of indie projects, huh?
Dang.
It's very sad.
Sad tale.
It will live on in our hearts.
Yeah.
But it was a great example of how, I guess you could say, a fan can take liberties with all of these characters in ways that still feel very faithful and accurate, and wanting to stay faithful to these characters in their original series. So huge ups to that.
And at the same time, trying to fit them into whatever crazy, wacky adventures in the murder game they devised for them to partake.
Exactly.
And speaking of adapting one character to another environment, I gotta say, my example comes from EU Senki Gold. And it's a curious case in which EU Senki is often described as an homage to Sengoku Runs, a tactic gameplay VM with a lot of dialogue focused around conquering regions. There's a lot of similarities. And in that title, in the gold version, there are some guest characters. Most notably, you have Usagi Kenshin from Sengoku Runs, which is interesting that they got a hold of, and got an agreement, I suppose, from Alisoft to put one of their characters in the title. Interestingly enough, Runs is a series of VNs that are famous for not having voice acting whatsoever. Now, Eio Senki, on the other hand, has a cast chock full of voice acting. So what they did is they found an excuse to say that in that crossover, she lost her voice. Therefore, this doesn't stand out as much that this is the one mute character in the VM. Because she never had a voice in Run series.
That's clever.
Yeah, that's actually makes sense. They made a kind of comfortable excuse that she cannot communicate verbally. She still can read and write, and that's how they devise an alternative plan of communicating with that character. But ultimately, this is a convenient excuse for her not to have spoken dialogue. Like, damn. I gotta give them credit to that. Now, granted,
oh yeah,
in the story itself, she plays very minor roles, so I would classify her more of a cameo than crossover. Ultimately, she gets recruited to your army, you go on conquesting other regions, and she tries to, as isekai stories tend to go, find a way home.
I do want to say I have big respect to all of the crossovers that continue respecting the intricacies of their original game series. Exactly like you mentioned, where she doesn't have voice acting in the Rant series, and so to reflect that and to make her faithful to her home series, she doesn't have voice acting in Ayuki Senki either.
Yeah, it's such a small thing, but when I was reading, I'm like, damn it, that's kind of convenient, but at the same time, kind of clever excuse they came up with. It fits. So it's funny. I gotta say, it works, especially since in runs, all the characters have their own beeps and bops when the text arrives. It's like, and every character has their own text noise when it appears, which kind of substitutes for the lack of voice acting. And she takes the same thing from this title, from having her own text appear noise instead of voice acting. That's cool. That's a nice homage to the Sengoku runs.
Now you gotta get one of these Ayuki Senki characters to guest show up in rants, and then boom, voice acting.
Everybody, how the hell?
Oh my god.
How the hell do you make that work? That would be funny.
Very cool, very cool.
Okay.
But that was just one character who made a nice appearance, with the nice storylines between the two series. What about a whole lot of characters? What about a whole big mess of several series, MR?
Oh boy, so this is a funny example. So I brought forth Mavlov, okay? Specifically, characters that Mavlov shares with Rambling Hearts, also known as Kimiga Nozomu, sometimes abbreviated Kimi Nozo. Now, personally, for the longest time, I didn't know about that, okay? It shares those characters. And the way I was made aware is one day I was talking with a friend of mine about what I was reading, and I showed him a screenshot, me reading Mavlov. And his response was, yeah, I saw that anime. I'm like, the hell are you smoking? Yeah, it was Kimi Nozo, wasn't it? Like, no. After that conversation, I go to Google that, and I'm like, wait, I know those characters. I Google like, what the hell is happening? How is that so old an anime? Like, apparently, yes, they share some characters between those two worlds. Like that was so weird to experience that way. What made me think? That's actually really funny from the Mavlov standpoint. It incorporates some characters that exist in the Kimi Nozo title.
And just to clarify, Kimi Nozo was first, right?
Yes.
It was a
which
pretty
is super hilarious.
Yeah, it was a pretty straightforward romance eroge of the main character and the various heroines. And among them were certain characters who showed up again later in the Mavlov series, including Mavlov and Unlimited and Alternative, right?
To put it also in perspective, right? Kimi Nozo was more notable and got more notoriety for its anime, right? The VN hasn't been translated since, I think it was released this year, no, previous year, just recently, right? VN has been translated to English. So the notoriety comes from an anime. So that's how majority of people to know the title, that it was based on VN. that shares character with another VN that has been translated earlier and has bigger notoriety than Mavlov. It's all jumbled up. It's like, that was so funny way of finding out. Especially with Mavlov, I read, and with exception of Extra, it's quite special, with Extra being more on the slice of lifey, safey side. But the rest is quite a journey and adventure to see it share characters with another slice of lifey romance, cozy title. It was so bizarre.
Because at first you gotta wonder, like, wait, maybe these aren't the same characters, they're just very similar designs. Yeah, maybe that's it. And then you look even more and they're like, no, that's literally the same character.
Exactly.
There's no confusion.
And the same relations are in the Mavlov as there is in Kimi no Uso. Like, those characters are friends, those are sisters, etc., etc. It's the same.
Exactly.
That was so funny.
And then, hey, MR, do you know anything about something called Altered Fables?
Oh, Altered Fable was a fan disc of sorts that brought all those characters all across Moveverse, let's call it like that, for one final hurrah. It was so funny.
Yeah, and I mean, it was even
read-
more side characters from other games like the
Yep.
Kimizonoga, as well as Muv-Luv all interacting together, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I've read the official English release of that Altered Fables, and it was a blast to read, even though I did not necessarily knew all the characters from their original works. But still, it was the same vibe I got as Carnival Phantasm is to Fate. Like a very cool, very unique send-off that managed to incorporate all those characters across the Moveverse.
Moveverse. Isn't it more like the Ageverse?
Ageverse, okay?
Age? Is that how you say it?
I don't know.
I always see it with that little carrot above, so I'm like, that's gotta have
that's
some
true.
weird special pronunciation, right? Right?
Yeah. Maybe. I don't know.
It can't just be as easy as age, right? We'll
Okay,
never
but
know.
How would you then say it's okay?
I'll never know. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Fair enough.
But,
yeah,
but that's really funny.
This one,
Yeah.
This one has a special place in how I found out about those crossovers.
Although that does raise the interesting question: can you say it's a crossover if it's all under one parent company? It's a difficult question because on the one hand, these are two separate series and they have no interactions, and you would only know they're together just by looking at like some of the credits or production details and stuff. Theoretically, it's possible for someone to have been a Muv-Luv fan and to never have known about any of the other stuff, and that doesn't invalidate their experience. But
exactly,
does it seem cheaper knowing that there was a far lower hurdle behind the scenes on the bureaucratic side to get these characters showing up on the same screen together? Does that cheapen it at all?
I think it makes it a little bit less special on some way or at some level, but at the same time it enriches the legacy of those characters, because they had their own struggles and they were main characters in their own stories, but here they play the support cast. And if I remember, Chizuru from Mavlov is the side character in Kimi no Uso, right? So it goes both ways.
I think so.
Because she's a rival for one of the characters in Kimi no Uso. So wait, Chizuru has a rival in the Mavlab, and that rival is main character in the Kiminozo, and Chizuru is there as well to fulfill her role as a rival. Like, it goes both ways.
There we go. That's some
You can
crossover
abandon
stuff.
your rival, okay?
I'm gonna drag you over here, beat you there too.
Exactly, come on. So.
That's a very interesting mix. It's very fun. I think everyone's having a lot of fun seeing all the characters together with all the spin-offs and fan discs available. So that's cool.
I completely agree.
Any last words, MR?
Not really. I want to read it. I am definitely intrigued. And I want to finally read Kiminozo and go full circle. Some people will start with the anime, I'll end with the VN, okay?
Now, speaking of companies who are having way too much fun with their own crossovers, I think the really obvious one here is Type Moon with the Fate series. Goodness gracious. You know, it's hard to even mention this in the first place because in the Fate series, the only visual novels so far have been like Fate Stay Night, and then its sequel, Fate Hollow Ataraxia, and kinda nothing again for the next 20 years. They've been going into all sorts of spin-offs. They've got fighting game spin-offs, they've got animes, light novels, mangas, mobile games. Oh, goodness gracious. And yet, throughout it all, they keep doing crossovers with themselves. The most obvious one is their mobile game, Fate Grand Order, which at this point has collabed with almost all of their products at this point, I swear. They've done something with Fate Extra CCC, they've done something with the Garden of Sinners anime, and I guess light novels. They've done stuff with Fate Zero, Fate Apocrypha, that's how you say it, that's right. Everything under the sun, all sorts of characters playable in the Fate Grand Order game. And recently they've also gone into the Tsukihime remake stuff as well. So they've got all sorts of stuff they've been working with, to some fans' annoyance. If you're not a Fate Grand Order fan, it might tick you off a little to see them getting all the love. But, not to mention, there was also that fighting game, the Melty Blood Type Lumina, which was supposed to be about Tsukihime, and then they got a whole bunch of DLC characters for Fate Grand Order characters like Mash and Count and Ushiwakamaru. So that's pretty cool in its own right too, except for the people who wanted to play the Tsukihime game. I guess you could say this is where all the crossover stuff is going wrong, when you have over-representation of one series at the expense of the other stuff. Oh no.
Think about how of a unique problem Fate faces, okay? And this is apparent in Fate Unlimited Codes. I think that's how it's called. It's you have a franchise that defined itself by having a tournament of power of sorts, right? A hoary gray world in which you have characters that fill roles, okay? But the moment in a singular title you host multiple instances of the same class, you need to prepend the name of the class with a story from where he came. So for example, you have a Lancer, but then you have zero Lancer because you need to specify which kind of Lancer this Lancer is. Like,
it's not that big of a deal because they all have their true names as well.
I know,
but I mean, in the game, they referred to them all by the class names. So then you had like Saber, Lancer, Rider, and stuff. But then when you have guest character Zero Lancer, you know, the Lancer from Fate Zero, that's different, right? It's just a naming thing. They could have easily called him by the real name instead.
But to be true to what Fate is about, so a war information, they don't.
I don't know how true that is anymore. It used to be a war of information.
Fair enough. But this is still a core component of what Fate was at least supposed to be about. The secrecy and outwitting by having to dig up someone else's true identity and then exploit that.
Mhm.
Now, it devolves into something else entirely of people pretty much boasting of what kind of hero experience they are, but whatever, neither here nor there. But this is a very Fate-like problem of you establish one thing, and even in the Fate State Night, you had the same problem. You had two archers, so obviously one archer just announced his name, and you no longer talk about archer, right? Like, this is a Fate, and then you have a crossover, so you bring more Lancers, so you need to classify those Lancers, but the titles they come from.
I don't know, I guess. This sounds like this sounds like a relatively small problem compared to seeing guest characters sharing the screen in hype fights and kick-ass moments. Right.
Then again,
that's what Fate's
it's
about.
A franchise that needs 17 sabers, so what the hell do I know, okay?
It's what the people want, baby.
It's just the supply of demand, okay? Fine. Okay.
Aye. So Fate is in its own little world, and it's having fun as far as we can all tell, although not everyone is in on the joke, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah. As long as it prints money, you just make and print more sabers, okay?
A very unique situation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but on that note, I do want to pose a question, and you listeners can chime in the comments. What would be your dream crossover, and why?
Mm-hmm. Well, you gotta start things off yourself, Amar. What's your dream crossover?
You know what? I need to go back to what you said. So, a unique interaction between characters. I have to give it to Muramasa and Grisaya. I would really love to see how those two worlds collide, specifically on the surface level. Protagonists of those two VNs have a similar energy, being very aloof and reserved. But underneath all of that, they behave so much more differently. And I would like to see those two personalities crash, especially with the entourage they will bring, most likely, with them to that crossover.
Demon Blade, Muramasa, and Grisaya. And I'm gonna assume this would take place in the Grisaya world. And unless you're suggesting that those high school kids get thrown into the brutal war landscape.
No, let's spare the trauma, okay? Let's go to the Grisaya world.
Okay, there we go.
Somewhat of an improvement, okay?
Wow, what a mix. I would never have guessed something like that. And that, oh my goodness, I can't imagine how that would play out. I couldn't take my eyes away.
Yeah, it's like, and having the first meeting of those two protagonists have that ironclad stone face stare off. I would love to see that, okay?
All right.
God damn. What about you, Zaurus?
If I had to think two visual novels and a crossover, you know what? I would go with Meteor World Actor and Ace Attorney. That's right. God. Yes, both of them in a somewhat modern, with fantastical world, but you'd have the police force in Meteor World Actor and the judicial system in Ace Attorney. In a sort of team up, they would both unite in trying to take down the criminals emerging from the world, but there would be unique challenges on both fronts. And I think the story writes itself, where there'd be the tension between the two, as they're both trying to work together, but they're not quite on the same side. There's still many problems that can crop up between the two, and all the issues that can arise. Plus, I think both of these titles have a lot of amazing cast members who I would love to see interact.
If I remember correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, in Ace Attorney there are, I would say, a slight supernatural element to it, just slight, not that much. And Meteor World Actor uses magic in its setup. So I wonder how those two aspects would intersect.
Yes, both of the worlds, like, there are degrees to it, but most of them are in a modern setting with some, magical elements in Ace Attorney and some, more serious, major, fantastical elements in Meteor World Actor. But I still think they could all intersect, and it would be very interesting. They're similar enough to where they could both, mix together, but still very unique to be there'd be a lot of wonder between the two.
Yeah, because I can envision both characters and tools that they are given to behave very clever and coy. Like, that would be interesting to see.
And like I said, a lot of shining personalities that would get some creative new outlets interacting with the rest of the cast in the world. But that's all a pipe dream. It would be really cool to see. A lot of clashing in tone, a lot of great cases, I would imagine. Ah, if only.
And the best part of it all, you would have unsatisfying ending. Perfect, right?
Oh, shut up. You know what? This would actually work with it, because Ace Attorney paces itself much better, where they have the case of the week, but they also have some sort of big event lining up in the background. And I think Ace Attorney could give a lot of grounding to Meteor World Actor.
Aim.
There we go. See, it'd work. They have similar structure, but Ace Attorney could deliver on that ending. I got faith.
Hey. Copium much? Okay.
Hi. Anyways, thank you all for listening. And if you guys have any other cool crossover mixes in the comments, that would be really cool to see as well. Let us know.
Yeah. Thanks to our listeners. VNture out.
VNture out.